Holy Gospel according to John, the first chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked Jesus, "Where did you come to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Now, we each have our limit of how thrill-seeking we are willing to be. I personally am somewhere in the middle, I think. A little adventurous, not too crazy. Not nearly as crazy as two of my family members who've tried to convince me to ride the newer roller coaster at Carowinds in Charlotte called Fury 325. If you haven't seen or heard of this roller coaster, the 325 in the name represents how far up you go at the beginning, 325 feet, before you furiously plummet straight down. That's what I've read, at least. I've tried to get people to tell me a little bit more about it, like what's it like? How does it feel? Is it terrifying? Is it fun? But you know what they say. Well, we could try and tell you, but it just really won't capture the thrill. You just have to experience it for yourself. Does that ever happen to you? There's this thing you want to describe to someone, but you just can't. Words won't do. The person just has to live it, has to come and see. Well, that's what's happening in our gospel reading today, where there's an invitation to come and see. Now, this gospel reading, this story from the first chapter of John, is a little bit confusing. It's not a long story, but it's a little hard to understand what's going on. So let's just think about it for a minute, scene by scene. In the first scene, Jesus goes to Galilee. There he meets a man named Philip and says to Philip, "Follow me." That's Jesus' short and sweet way of inviting Philip to become a disciple. And apparently Philip does, because in the second scene, Philip goes and finds his friend Nathanael to tell him the news. It's not clear if this is minutes later or days later, but Philip goes to where Nathanael is and tells him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael doesn't seem too impressed by Philip's announcement, because all he can say in response is, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" So Philip says to Nathanael, "Come and see." The third scene, sometime later. Again, we don't know how much time has passed, probably not much. Nathanael comes to meet Jesus, and Jesus sees him, and he compliments him. "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Confused because he has never even met Jesus, Nathanael replies, "Where did you get to know me?" And Jesus answers by saying, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. Had Jesus seen Nathanael in some sort of supernatural way? The story isn't clear, but something beyond the ordinary must have taken place, because Nathanael responds to Jesus with a dramatic reaction, saying, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Finally, Jesus affirms Nathanael and points to what more there is to come. Do you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? Well, you will see greater things than these. Scene 1, Jesus meets Philip and calls him to be a follower. Scene 2, Philip finds Nathanael to tell him about Jesus. Scene 3, Nathanael comes to Jesus and believes in him. It all happens quickly, but that's the gist of the story. And in the middle of that, there's an important phrase that, well, the whole saga kind of revolves around. And that's this phrase, come and see. Come and see. It's the invitation that Philip makes to Nathanael, who was suspicious about the idea of Jesus being the one. But rather than try to explain everything or convince Nathanael of something, Philip just says, come and see. Come and experience it yourself. And that's how it is in the gospel stories about Jesus over and over again. People are invited not just to hear Jesus or to think about Jesus, but to come and be present with Jesus, to behold who he is and what he is all about. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Jesus desires that people come to faith in him, and there are often times in a life of faith where you just can't explain it. You have to come and experience it for yourself. Philip invites Nathanael, come and see. And that is the beginning of the encounter with Jesus that changes Nathanael's life. And what about us? When and where are we invited or inviting others to come and see? Well, there's two things we know about inviting, I think. Number one, inviting is important. We know that part of the gospel imperative is to invite others to know Jesus. We know that inviting others to church, to worship, to join in ministry is something we are supposed to do willingly, joyfully as Christian people. And number two, inviting is difficult. It's often an intimidating task that we may not feel well prepared for. It requires a level of comfort and courage that doesn't come naturally for all. And so we don't always do a good job with this essential Christian work. The story of Nathanael and Philip should give us a little insight, though, because what we find in that invitation Philip extends to Nathanael is really quite simple. It's a simple invitation to come and see. Remember, Philip isn't explaining, he isn't convincing, he's just inviting his friend to come and experience something meaningful, trusting that somehow God will do the important work. For Philip, and for all of us, come and see, well, it's the invitation not of those who have all the answers, and not of those who are sure about everything. It's just what you say when you have something compelling that just might be worth believing in. And so we invite others into this experience of life among God's people. We know it's a roller coaster sometimes. The ups and downs of faith are real. But we believe that what happens here is something others should experience too. You know who does a pretty good job of that around here at Zion, our youth. I know I talked about youth in the sermon last week, but I just have to brag on them one more time and say they are good inviters. If you come on Wednesday night, for instance, to Zion, you'll see a lot of people here, a lot of young people, and many of them are here because they have been invited by someone. I imagine the youth who invited their friends to church in this way did so not because they think they have all the answers, and not because they are so sure about this faith in God thing. I think they do it because they believe that what happens here is something others should experience too. Come and see. Who needs to hear those words from you this week? Who are the Nathaniel sitting under a fig tree waiting to be invited by you? Who could you invite into this community of faith by saying, I could try to tell you about it, but it just won't really capture the thrill. You just have to experience it for yourself. Let's challenge ourselves to think on that and to look for them this week. And as we do, let's remember one last little detail of this gospel story. In the story, as soon as Philip says to Nathanael, "Come and see," the very next thing, the story says, Jesus saw Nathanael. Jesus saw him. And isn't that the truth of this Christian life? All the while we think we are struggling to see Jesus, Jesus sees us. Jesus sees us not because we've joined the club or done all the right things. Jesus sees us because Jesus loves us, cares about us, and wants what's best for us. And that is the truth all need to come and see.